Good evening, everyone. It's 6:02, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. With great respect and humility, we acknowledge and honor the lands of the Snuneymuxw people, on whose lands we hold our meeting this evening. The Snuneymuxw people maintain their profound, unique, and spiritual connection to the land through ageless traditions, teachings, stewardship, and expressions of reciprocity. I'd also like to acknowledge that many of our trustees are joining us from the other nations that we serve, Snuneymuxw and Stumeenus. We have no transfer of items to the open meeting agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or change in order to the agenda? Seeing none, is there any opposition to approving the agenda as presented? The agenda carries. Moving on to approval of the minutes. 7.1, April 22nd. That the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, adopt the minutes from the regular Board of Education meeting held April 22nd, 2020. If I could have somebody move those. Moved by Trustee Berzovich, seconded by Trustee Wilkinson. Is there any opposition to carrying the minutes? Seeing none, they carry unanimously. Section 8 on the agenda, 8.1, that the Section 72.3 report from the closed board meeting held on April 22nd, 2020 be received. If I could have that moved. Moved by Trustee Wilkinson, seconded by Trustee Barron. Is anyone opposed? Seeing no opposition, they carry unanimously. 8.2, that the Section 72.3 report from the special closed board meeting on May 6, 2020 be received. Moved by Trustee Berzovich, seconded by Trustee Barron. Is there any opposition to carrying those minutes? Seeing none, the motion carries. Announcements and reminders. June 3rd, we will be holding our Education Committee at 6 p.m. June 10th, Business Committee meeting will be at 6 p.m. June 24th, regular board meeting will be held at 6 p.m. And a reminder that June 26th is an administrative day and schools are closed. So at this time, a reminder that our meetings are continuing to be held online. So we have the presentation up. And so, let me see here. Presentations 10.1, Nanaimo Ladysmith Schools Foundation, Ed Pulley Chair, and Dan Morris, Vice Chair. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. My name is Dan Morris, and I'm the Vice President of the Nanaimo Ladysmith Schools Foundation. I'm here with Ed Pulley, our President, as well as Crystal Dennison, our Executive Director. We thank you for giving us the time to share with you tonight. Just wanted to take a quick moment. About 10 years ago, I was in a Rotary meeting, and we had at the time the former Executive Director, Aaron Vanstein, come and give a presentation to our group about the work that was being done by the Schools Foundation. That day, my eyes were open to the challenges that many kids in our community battle every day. I learned that there were kids in our community who were being fed off the sides of teachers' desks. There were kids in our community with hand-me-down worn-out shoes with their toes sticking out that were receiving new shoes from the foundation. I was told about kids who were being helped with their basic needs that we all take for granted, and I was shocked to learn of this in our own society, where many of us have excesses while most are most vulnerable. The kids were and continue to be in need. One of the many questions that Aaron was asked at that time, and I'm sure Crystal continues to be asked each time she goes and presents, is why are these kids not being looked after at home by their parents? And the answer is, it doesn't matter. Our focus is to help these kids. It's not their fault that our parents either don't or can't make the well-being the top priority. Where help is needed, help is provided by the kids to our community through the work of this foundation. This was my introduction to the work of the foundation, and since 2013, I have been on the board lending a helping hand, along with many other talented and caring community members who freely give of their time, their money, and their expertise to help. The foundation has a long history in Nanaimo, and it started out with just the need for managing the scholarships to award deserving graduates. But it has grown so much into so much more, and we hope that this presentation today will help shed light on the wide-reaching and significant work that the foundation does. The remainder of the presentation will be the slides you're now seeing on the screen there. So you see that we've been incorporated since 2008, and as I previously mentioned, the Nanaimo Schools Foundation Award Society was started back in 1982. We have a board of 10 community volunteers serving 2-year terms, but as I've been around since 2013, lots of others have as well. Lots of people see the value that this foundation does and stick around much longer than their 2-year terms. We have minimal staff resources and consistent program growth, and we have 2 full-time staff that are seconded from Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools. And we have program staff outside as needed for additional programs. We can go to the next slide, please. So our mission and vision is very similar to what the school districts is. You'll see that the second point there, that every student reaches their true potential. And the tagline for the schools is success for all. So we have a common direction and a common purpose to look after the kids in our community and to help them succeed. The values are listed below. We can go on to the next slide there. So as I mentioned at the beginning, when I learned about the poverty that's in our community back in 2010, we're now 10 years later, and Nanaimo continues to have one of the highest child poverty rates in BC. We have many students that are affected by poverty. There's still kids that are hungry at school. They don't have school supplies. They have inadequate clothing or shoes. They lack money for field trips, band instrument rental, graduation fees, just being a part of everything that happens in school. School's such a social thing. It's hard for kids that are left out not to have an opportunity to be a part of things that happen in the school. Aside from that, we also have the scholarships and bursaries to reward the accomplished and deserving students to pursue their post-secondary education. Yesterday, we sat down with our selection committee and we went through the first 70 awards that were assigned to students, and tomorrow we'll be back again for another 8-hour day assigning another batch of awards, and we'll have that all done by early next week, going through the whole scholarship process. We have a broad and universal community support demonstrating the importance of the Schools Foundation's work. Next screen, please. So how do we help? We help in a variety of different ways. We implement the efficient and direct-to-student programs. The nice thing is that when there's a student or a school that's in need, we can help them right away. We can help them quick. We have quick and efficient response to any request that comes in. We can allocate funds that meet student needs, and you'll see in the side slides that come after this one, there's a lot of funds that have gone to help out the students so far this year and in years that will come ahead. And we provide confidential help support for students. The students don't need to be isolated and set out that they have problems, so we can do that confidentially and to help them succeed in that way. We encourage many graduating students to pursue post-secondary education through the scholarships, the bursaries, and the awards that are given out each year. The numbers of those will come on a screen down a little way further as well. And we provide schools with support where funds are not otherwise available. So here's a couple of some of the programs that we use to help students. We have the Student Support Fund. That's the one that's available for the schools to have access to buy shoes for kids, to help with basic needs that they need. We have the Food for Schools program that we'll go into more detail in just a moment. We have the Music Initiative grants that has provided countless instruments for elementary schools and school programs for getting music into the schools. We have enhanced learning initiatives, and once again, the scholarships, bursaries, and awards are another large thing that we look after each year. Next slide, thank you. The Student Support Funds, this is where the principals, teachers, and the staff, they can request funds in order to help out students, like whether it's food, shoes, whether it's emergency dental, eye care, medical, anything that kids need that they can't get elsewhere, we're there to be able to help. So it's something that's huge. I remember when I first started with the foundation, that one time it was called the President's Checkbook. That sort of really shows what it's for. It's just for those schools to help out those kids that right on the ground where they need the help. Next screen's on the Music Initiative grants. So we funded the purchase of instruments for numerous elementary schools. We funded equipment for Learning Alternatives Recording Studio, and we also helped with the NDSS musical theater production of Mamma Mia last year. The Enhanced Learning Initiatives, these ones help develop the student leadership, community development, and social responsibility. The Yes to No program, the RCMP policing, and Vancouver Island University. We have the District Initiative grants where Many different schools in our community have been able to come up with their own programs and get involved with their communities. There's a big one that happened over in Gabriola that helped the kids got to interact with the seniors in the community, and that one was a huge success. We have the Trustee Legacy Grants, CUPE for Kids, Indigenous Student Connectivity. And on the next page, this talks about the scholarship and bursaries that we're in the middle of right now. So this year we had 439 student applications. So we have 424 scholarships, awards, and bursaries, totaling $355,235 that will be given out to graduating students in the school district 68. And there's 122 district authority scholarships that we also look after managing and giving out as well. Next screen talks about our food for schools. Now, everybody knows the drastic changes that have happened everywhere in the world since COVID-19. Before COVID-19 came along, we were partnered with the Breakfast Clubs of Canada, Loaves and Fishes here in town, the Nanaimo Foundation, the Tom Harris Foundation, and DP World, providing weekly food hamper deliveries to support school-based meals programs for 70,000 plus meals. From 2017 to 2020, we expanded from 5 schools up to 16 schools. We helped out with the purchase of kitchen equipment, supplies, dishwashers. Over 650 students are served daily, and countless staff hours are saved by the services provided. Prior to this program, we had different teachers in different schools, or different staff in the schools actually going to pick up food and getting them pulled away from the schools. Now the food arrives right up the schools for them to work with right there. It's one of the examples of a big savings for the district. On the next page, we'll see what's happened all in the last couple of months. Now, this was a dynamic change that happened quickly. Crystal helped facilitate securing some additional funding to help this whole program. We had partnerships with the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools, the Breakfast Clubs of Canada, Loaves and Fishes, and the Nanaimo Foundation, Tom Harris Foundation, DP World, and then we also had United Way, People for a Healthy Community, and local business individuals who all pitched in and threw some money in to help out. Since then, we've provided weekly food hamper deliveries up to 997 students directly to their homes. 33 schools from Lanceville to Ladysmith, including Cedar and Gabriola. 5,793 hampers have been provided to date, with over $140,000 worth of food provided to our community. Now, these are the kids that were only getting those foods fed out at the school that at home weren't getting much. So now they continue to get fed even though they're at home while school's out. We look at our fund distribution for 2019-2020 to date. We've spent $106,000 on food for schools before COVID-19. In the short period of time, last 2-3 months since COVID-19's been flared up, we spent $140,000 supporting the kids in their homes in the community. This year we've had $38,000 in school supplies, $30,000 through the Student Support Fund, music grants, you see $12,000, and you can see the rest of the ones on there. So there's a lot of money, a total of $1.67 thousand that was invested into the School District 68 students this year alone. Thank you, with great thanks to many generous donors. So the money comes from, some of it comes from the public schools, a lot of it comes from grants, deeds, and gifts from individuals, corporations, donations, both individuals and groups. We have the Stock the Lockers campaign every year that contributes funds that we then use to help support the students. There's the School District 68 Lotto 68 payroll 50/50. Then we also have probably seen the signs around for Hello Spring and Handmade for the Holidays craft markets that are held each year. Well, they were until COVID-19 came along, so but that was another one of our big fundraisers. And then we also have various fundraisers with raffles and whatnot. Now, let's just to show the type of connection that we have as a foundation, where we can reach out into the community and make a connection with. This is the list of all the most recent partners and funders that we have in the city of Nanaimo that we have relationships with. Last year, I got to join some of the other board members at Nanaimo Honda as they launched off their big campaign, raising money in their own dealership for the schools. So that was a neat one to see. And there's lots of other examples you see on here of different companies that have helped out along the way to make this all a big success. Lastly, our last slide here, how can you guys help? Well, there's a lot of work that gets done. We have a lot of volunteers. There's volunteer board members that have busy lives that are giving up their time to help make sure that this foundation is a success. And Crystal's done an amazing job of making sure that all these programs work. And one thing that really helps from your guys' input and your guys' help is the continued secondment of the school's staff that we have for the positions. Continuing to provide space where we can operate out of. So the offices are here used daily, looking after food, bustling in and out. I've been here multiple different times and seen food stacked up to the ceiling that is then gone out to the school. So there's a lot of activity that happens in this office if you haven't been by for a visit. Continuing to provide financial support for the Nanaimo Ladysmith Schools Foundation. The amount given compared to what that goes out is a very small investment for a big gain. The trustee legacy grants are greatly needed. Cultivating potential donations to the Ladysmith Schools Foundation is another area that we can use help, and promoting the foundation to the communities served by the public schools. So those are all the different areas that your involvement and your commitment to help us out can help us to continue to do the work that we're doing here. And that concludes what we had prepared. We got some time. I have both Ed here and Crystal if anyone has any questions that are too tough for me to answer, because to bring in the big guns. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Dan. That was a really great overview of everything that we, sometimes hear a little bit about, but perhaps not all of the details. So I appreciate this update that comes to us annually. Before moving into questions, I just want to acknowledge, it's, as the board chair, I've had the recent experience of attending the Food Distribution Center, and seeing Crystal in action is something to behold. She's super organized and supporting all of the employees that we've been able to provide, supporting, doing all the hampers, seeing everybody line up. The organization that goes into that food distribution is significant and having a tremendous impact. So we're really grateful for that. And to see an audience last year, which we won't see this year, but to see an audience of parents and caregivers of students who receive the bursaries that are organized by the foundation is incredibly moving. So just having that firsthand opportunity, have seen some of the work that you all do come to fruition is really quite incredible. So I just want to start with a huge thank you for that.
Very welcome.
We have a question from Trustee Brzezowicz.
There we go. Apologies. The work of the foundation is amazing. I'm incredibly honored and excited and proud of what you guys all do. I have had requests from people to figure out how to donate. So if we could get a reminder of how to send donations to the foundation right now, given COVID, that would be appreciated.
I will turn the computer to the one who knows.
Hi, we have a direct link on through Canada Helps. It's on our Facebook page, our website, and if you'd like, I can actually send a link to I'll send it out by email to trustees as well, so you can share it wide and far through your networks. The easiest way at this point is through a direct link to canadahelps.org. Every donation is tax receivable, and they'll automatically be sent through that platform. And we're grateful for any donations are great. Great.
Yes, I would certainly appreciate getting that by email so I could forward it out to some people.
Absolutely, I'll send it right away.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Trustee Stanley?
Yes, let me start by saying, wow, you are good people doing good work. Like, this is so incredibly needed here in Nanaimo, and I'm just very grateful that you've given your time and clearly your hearts to this, so thank you. I wanted to ask a question about one of your slides that was talking about the food distribution, food for schools. Yes. And you had some numbers up there, and I thought you said one number, the 106,000 was for before COVID, and the 140 was during COVID?
Correct.
So does that mean that for 7 months, we spent 106,000, but in the past 2.5 or so months, we've spent 140,000 on food? That's how much the need has increased?
Let me turn you over to Crystal. Let's just leave her over there.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really important information about the needs in our community. So thank you for that. Shocking.
Yeah. What we saw pre and post COVID, when we started after spring break, we were currently serving 16 school locations. weekly we were delivering. Since COVID and students learning from home, we've seen an increase to 33 schools have students accessing the program now.
Wow.
Yeah, so I just got an invoice today for May for primarily milk. It was a $20,000 bill.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Sad.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions for our presenters? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So I just want to thank you again for all of the work that you continue to do to support students across the entire district. And thank you for joining us this evening.
All right, thank you again for having us. It was nice to be able to share with you what we got going on over here.
Great, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. All right, moving on to our correspondence section of our agenda. Making sure I'm up here. 11.1, Susan Toth, demolition of South Welling Elementary School. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education of School District Number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, refer the above correspondence from Susan Toth dated April 21st, 2020 to the Board Chair for response. Do I have a mover for the motion? Okay. Moved by Trustee Brzovic, seconded by Trustee Keller. Is there any opposition to the motion?
Actually, I have a question, Chair.
Go ahead.
I'm just wondering if you could let us know what this response in general would look like to, I mean, assuming both community members, both with regards to the same issue. Perhaps we could have some information about that.
You want to discuss the content of the letter?
Well, we're being asked to move this, but I don't have any information about what that would look like. So just given, the level of concern from this community, it would be nice to have an idea about what was being sent back.
Well, typically we don't pre-plan what would go into a motion or a letter that would be a response to a motion. So I would need to have time to go away and work on those letters if both motions were to be the same, and then be able to, I need time to actually write the letter. I would not pre-write a letter in anticipation of a motion passing. So at this point, I need time to review and go over it and determine the response. If the board would like to see those letters and understand the content of them prior to going out, certainly I can entertain that. But at this point, I haven't concluded what the content of that letter would be.
Okay, I'll leave that up to the board member to decide. I would be interested in that, but I'll curious to see what the other board members feel.
Do trustees wish to see the letter prior to it going out? The comment from Trustee Higginson.
Hi there, thank you, Chair. I guess I can understand the question from Trustee Stanley being sort of what would we be responding, because it feels like we're still, awaiting a number of reports and things like that. So I guess that's why I can understand why the question is, what would the chair be responding? I don't think it's a request to, edit the letter or wordsmith it so much as understand the direction that the chair has from the board in terms of this particular issue at this point, because it does feel like it's still hanging out there, and perhaps that's what the response is that it's being worked on with all of the information that will be brought forward today, I think.
Thank you for your comment. To be honest, consultation is continuing to be underway, and we haven't made any decisions. So certainly there would be no decisions within the content of the letter. but I think it's appropriate for the board to make a response that we will continue working with the community as we have been under the last little while. And then pending board providing their opinions of that draft letter, given that we are still in the midst of a process, we can edit the content of the letter at a later time, but I can't speak to the exact content of the letter at this point, given that things are ongoing. Are there any other questions or comments to the motion? Trustee Keller?
Perhaps I'll leave this in through the chair in your hands, whether or not this is an appropriate time to ask the question, or if you'd like me to wait for the next one. But I was hoping to get a better understanding of from staff and a bit of an update in terms of where the process is at, so we understand how to deal with the motion.
So what I'm going to do is explain to the board that we are speaking to the motion of how to handle a piece of correspondence that has come to the board. When a piece of correspondence comes to the board, our policy states that we must determine what we do with that correspondence. The suggestion to the board is to respond via the board chair response. Any updates around the project itself would come at a later time through an appropriate agenda item, which I believe is on the agenda at 13.1. So the content of the letter, all we are simply determining here is how the board wishes to respond to the letter, not the content of the letter or the anticipated decisions that are upcoming around the topic, but just simply that it's the board chair who will respond to the letter. Perhaps the discussion under 13.1 will help us determine what the content of that letter looks like.
Very good. Thank you. I just want to understand that. Thanks.
Another comment from Trustee Barron.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I believe everything that I wanted to say was already stated, but I guess I will just clarify that I do support the motion for our board chair to provide a response to this correspondence.
Trustee Brzovic?
Agreed. Yes, the response should come to the chair, and as you've stated, Chair, the response will be dictated based on what we learn further in our further conversation later in the meeting. I would assume. That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer Walsh, did you want to add something?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just that we'll have an update at 13.1, exactly where the process is, including the communications that we've had with the individual, at least one of the individuals that's subject that's written to the board.
Thank you. So I will recall the question on the motion that the Board of Education of School District 68 refer the above correspondence from Susan Toth dated April 21st, 2020 to the board chair for response. Is there any opposition to the moved motion? Seeing no opposition, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. 11.2, that the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Lady Smith, refer the above correspondence from Helen Tilley, regarding South Wellington Elementary to the board chair for response. Do we have a mover? Moved by Trustee Keller, seconded by Trustee Brzovic. Is there any discussion on this correspondence? Motion. Seeing none, is there any opposition to carrying the motion? The motion carries unanimously. 11.3, Nanaimo Clippers Junior A Hockey Club, regarding graduation ceremonies. That the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Lady Smith, refer the above correspondence from Nanaimo Clippers Junior A Hockey Club to staff for a response. Is there a mover? Trustee O'Neill moves the motion, and a second by Trustee Barron. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, is there any objection to approving the motion? Seeing none, the motion carries unanimously. 11.4, BC Ed Access Society, correspondence dated May 19th, 2020. That the Board of Education of School District Number 68, and I'm Liddy Smith, refer the above correspondence from BC Ed Access dated May 19th, 2020 to be received and filed. Is there a mover? Trustee O'Neill moves the motion, and a second by Trustee Wilkinson. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, is there any objection to passing the motion? The motion carries unanimously. We have no committee reports this month from the Business Committee or the Education Committee, which takes us to our senior staff reports. 13.1, Secretary Treasurer Mark Walsh regarding South Wellington Elementary School.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you'll see the report brief information sheet in the agenda with respect to the direction for staff to reach out to the community prior to providing a business case for the board to determine whether to proceed with the demolition of the school site. So we've had two opportunities now to formally meet with the community. First, April 30th, we had a social distance meeting and we reached out to local health authorities to make sure that we were doing everything appropriately with a very small number of community representatives on the site to make sure that they knew where the basis of the board's or the capital plan submission came from. Made sure that they had any and all information that they were seeking, that they needed, as well as the opportunity to provide some feedback and tell them what the process would look like. We then held a larger meeting, quite well attended. I'm not quite sure of the numbers, on the 20th of May. Again, a very similar concept. It was to ensure that each individual had the opportunity in the community to be aware of the information that with respect to the building condition, with respect to why the board was considering demolition in the circumstances. And then we also ensured that the community was made aware of how they will be able to provide feedback both to staff for our final recommendation to the board in June, but as well as how they can, attempt to influence and provide their voice to trustees who ultimately make the decision. So that's the process part, and I do believe that it was a positive meeting, and I believe that information is shared. Everything we have about the facility is on an FAQ that is shared with trustees, but is also available publicly online. And we've updated that FAQ since the meeting to add a little bit further information for the community. So the next steps really are the RDN is looking to get to have the opportunity to see the condition of the facility. So for instance, we know that it can't be used as a school site. If we ever did want, or the building cannot be used as a school building without significant modifications, seismic upgrading, as well as the facility is just not suited for that purpose given its size. But the RDN is looking to see if there's potentially alternative uses that wouldn't cost the full amount to upgrade it. But we haven't seen that yet. And of course, any communication between the RDN and the district would be happening in camera if there was further discussions to happen. So we'll keep the board apprised of any further developments on that front. So the intention right now is to bring a recommendation to the June board meeting. We did meet with the Ministry of Education, who indicated that as long as we were, able to be confident that in the event that we proceeded with demolition, that we'd be done by the end of March, their fiscal year, that we can take a little bit past June to get that report to them. So we haven't expended any funds at this point. And I think you'll see June 24th will be the date that we bring back that recommendation, which will certainly depend on if the RDN has any interest, as well as what we're hearing from the community for the board to make a determination.
Thank you. We have a question from Trustee Keller.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, just wanted to know if we have a sense of whether June 24th gives enough time to get the information that the regional district is looking for on the building.
My understanding is the regional district is actually in the process of getting their information. And in fact, their consultant was present at our meeting on the 20th of May, along with regional district staff. So With respect to what they need to make their decisions, I'm confident the 24th is sufficient time for information. Whether it's sufficient time for the political decision that would come from that, I couldn't speak to that, but I do believe they know our timelines, and so they've got that in mind.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer Walsh.
Trustee Stanley?
Hi, thank you. So through the chair to Secretary Treasurer Walsh, I guess I have kind of two questions because I wasn't sure that I entirely understood your last response to Trustee Keller. Were you saying that you have confidence that the report to the RDN and the staff will be able to make their determination, but the political decision might be the board processes? Is that what you were referencing there?
Well, certainly I'm not aware of what processes that they have, but that was what I was referencing. So their consultant will have the information to them in sufficient, well before June 24th, because they've been very active, and I'd like to acknowledge the work of staff of the RDN. Very impressed, and so I just couldn't speak to the RDN's processes, just to reach out to the district from a political level, if that was the case.
Thank you for the clarity on that.
Go ahead, Trustee Stanley.
Sorry, I got distracted by that question. So through the chair again to Secretary Treasurer Walsh, this recommendation that we're talking about coming forward to our board, I know you don't know what the content will be, but is it going to be about potentially whether we, is it going to be concerning whether we pursue the demolition or not?
Yes, it certainly will. And the reason being is that if we don't make, the board doesn't make a decision by that point, we are going to run out of runway in the event that we want to get access to the ministry funding for the demolition funds. So unfortunately, there's the pressure point there because we have access to these funds. If that was the direction that staff recommended and the board accepted that recommendation, then that's in reality the timelines that the decisions have to be made. Otherwise, we won't be able to proceed with our business case. We won't be able to get final approval and get our request for proposal out for the actual demolition work to have the funds expended at the ministry's timelines. And so we've already moved it back a little bit because we feel like we're confident that we're able to accomplish all of that if need be in the timeline, but much past June 24th, and we don't anticipate that we would be able to proceed.
Okay, thank you for that information, and thank you for all your efforts to communicate with the community. It's been very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Secretary Treasurer Walsh? Okay, so seeing none, thank you for that report. Moving on to 13.2, Superintendent Scott Saywell.
Well, thank you, and good evening, everybody. Through you, Madam Chair, I wanted to give a little bit of an update concerning our restart plan. And the process went something like this. All 60 districts submitted a restart plan to the ministry to be into them on Monday, the 25th. And I was optimistic by this time this evening I'd be able to share that plan with you. I can't because we haven't received approval from the Ministry of Education yet, but I would like to share a few things. And I've had some questions about the reasons why we're restarting and when other jurisdictions in Canada haven't. So I want to speak to that question, and I want to maybe allay some of the fears and anxieties about our plan. Well, I can't go into detail. I can share some of the questions that the ministry is asking of us. And as soon as we get approval, by the way, we're a button push away from making that information public. I'm going to start with answering a question that I've received many times in public, and that is, why are we restarting schools now and other jurisdictions are not? I typically start my answer to that question in the last little while, particularly by saying that the number of COVID cases on Vancouver Island is almost non-existent now. We have one case in the hospital, and we haven't had a case in almost 3 weeks now, any new cases. So about 900,000 people on the island, one case in the hospital. That's about a 1 in a million chance right now. And so the work that we've been doing for the last little while, as Dr. Bonnie Henry keeps telling us, has been producing dividends, right? So it is very safe right now to send children back to school. And that's the number one answer I give. There are also some other good reasons, because the restart plan of the education system is also part of the restart plan for the province and the economy. And we are a critical part of that restart plan. Another reason is that the longer we are out, our most vulnerable learners are impacted the most. And for that reason, we have to get them back into school as quickly as possible. And finally, I think a good reason to be restarting now is this will give us a really good indication of things to expect in September and onward. I really appreciate that the ministry has given us these 5 different stages to look at that over the next year or 18 months that I'm sure we will be moving in and out of. The stage we're moving into, which is stage 3, involves K-5 students going back 2 to 3 days per week. We've made it public that in Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools, we will be returning 2 days a week for K-5. And so while those days haven't been identified, parents will know that if they choose to send their student back to us, they will be coming 2 days a week. In grade 6 or 7, that will happen 1 day a week, and grades 8 to 12, again, 1 day a week. We will also be encouraging some of our most vulnerable students to come back full-time, and we will be able to accommodate them, as well as students with diverse abilities. And we're looking forward to engaging them once again. As far as I want to go through a few of the questions that the ministry asks of us in our document that we submitted again on Monday. And I hope this helps the community appreciate that we are in a way covering our bases. One of the first questions is, did the district engage with Indigenous peoples? And yes, we did. We did engage with all of our First Nations partners and Indigenous people, and our plans changed accordingly. I can tell you that the board chair and I attended a meeting with our chief from Snuneymuxw and our CAO, and I know what they had to say influenced our plans for opening our public school on reserve, Quam. A very productive meeting. Around the issue of health and safety, the ministry asks, do you have a health and safety plan that implements the provincial COVID-19 health and safety guidelines for K-12 settings, the COVID-19 public health guidance for K-12 school settings, and WorkSafe BC guidelines? The answer to that question is yes. And our planning around health and safety for students and staff and the community is quite extensive, and I'm hoping even if we get word this evening, I can share that publicly. Cleaning supplies. Does your district have the supplies available to implement cleaning and hygiene protocols in your health and safety plan? Yes, it does. And again, you'll find out that the district has intensive plans in this area, and we feel very comfortable, and students and parents should feel very safe in attending. Yeah, I spoke to this, but is the district ensuring children of essential service workers can attend school 5 days a week? Yes, and we have plans in place to accommodate those students. Is the district continuing school meal programs? Great question on the heels of the Nanaimo Ladysmith Schools Foundation presentation. And you heard the great stories of them providing food to all of our vulnerable families. We will continue to do so. And other questions about how we're going to deliver the continuity of learning when we perhaps have partial return of our students. And we have plans in place to deal with in-school instruction as well as students who choose to remain at home and learn. So, well, I can't share our exact plans. I hope that the public and trustees appreciate that the plans, once you see them, are quite extensive and take into account a whole host of safety measures. With that, I will take any questions, and I will thank the Learning Services team for the restart plan. And we have Deputy Superintendent Tim Davey here and Assistant Superintendents Dawn Belcombe and Laura Tate to respond to any questions you may have. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Saywell. I would just like to acknowledge yourself and all of our staff members that have been providing a significant amount of support into building this plan and having an appropriate response to the ministry in a timely fashion. So I know how much work went into that. I just want to express thanks on behalf of the board for that work. Our first question comes from Trustee Higginson.
Hello, thank you for that update, Superintendent Saywell. I too want to echo the praise and gratitude from our chair. I think most of our senior team has not had a day off since March 17th. So thank you very much for all of you for all your efforts to meet our students' needs during this very, very challenging time and context. I'm just wondering if we had, you know, you talked about how you haven't gotten plans back, but I know a lot of parents are kind of just looking for some kind of communications. And I'm just wondering if we could, even if we're still waiting for the ministry to approve the plan, if there's a possibility just to even communicate out to parents that we're still waiting, but we're working really hard to get it. Because I've had a lot of folks asking me about when they're going to hear from their principal.
Yeah, thank you. So we did a survey initially when we heard that we were restarting and engaged parents in that survey. I know that both principals and classroom teachers are engaging parents in similar type of surveys. My hope is, and my understanding is that we're going to hear either this evening or tomorrow. And so we will be able to release all of the documents to the public to ensure that they understand where we're heading.
Thank you. We have another question from Trustee Higginson.
Thank you. I'm the only one with questions right now. Can you just go into a little bit more detail about busing? I've had a lot of questions about what busing will look like. Are we going to offer busing? I think you touched on it a little bit, but just, people are wondering if there's a lot of questions about it. So if you could just provide, families who might actually be watching, and if not, we could direct them to this at another time, what a bus ride will look like if we're going to offer it.
Great question. Thank you. Through the chair. Yeah, it really is a great question, and I should have mentioned it because I've been seeing in the news in some districts they're not planning to run busing. We will run busing. There will be some protocols around physical distancing on buses and some barrier for our bus drivers. But buses will be running and protocols will be in place.
Trustee Higginson, do you have a follow-up question?
No, I can no, I don't have a follow-up to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Stanley?
Hi. Yes, thank you. So again, briefly, immense gratitude to the incredible dedication and hard work of our staff. I'm wanting to understand, so what I'm also hearing from parents is that it's hard to make the decision about whether they want their kids to return because they don't have the information about what it will look like. And so parents are challenged in making that decision. How can we communicate? Do you have any idea, like, is there any information about whether parents want to change their mind? Meaning they didn't feel comfortable saying yes now, but they may once they start to see or hear what the specifics are. Is that possible? Can we include that information as well? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. Yeah, we wouldn't begrudge any parents from not coming back to us right away. And once they inform the school, because we have protocols around how many students in a classroom and so on, then students will be able to return, if not initially. So we won't hold them to their first decision. And I think in jurisdictions that have returned to in-class instruction, what we've seen is a gradual return of the student population. So we're sensing that will happen in Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools, and we will welcome students and families to come back to school when they're ready.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question, Trustee Stanley?
No, just appreciate the information. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Higginson, you're next.
Thank you. So will we be doing, I'm just trying to get folks sort of a picture. I know you've asked, but I think, we can speculate a little bit, but not too much. Is there in the plan to do staggered drop-offs, staggered recesses at the elementary schools where there will be more kids?
Maybe that's, thank you for the question. I might pass that to Assistant Superintendent Tate if she's willing to answer that question. And if not, I can.
Thank you. Yes, I'm willing. Through the chair, thank you. Schools have been directed to look at their situation, and if it makes the most sense to stagger start times, they are able to do that. They're not going to be able to stagger them by too much. We have supervision duties that we would have to take into account. So we could maybe look at an example of one stagger of about 15 minutes. And then looking at others to cover that supervision before school. And then yes, they will be staggering little recess, big recess, so that it's just to avoid overcrowding. So that is occurring in elementary schools.
Thank you, Ms. Tate. Trustee Higginson, you have another question?
I do. I just wondered, I hear a lot about concerns from employees about the ability for the buildings to be safe. And my understanding is that each school, and I might be wrong on this, and maybe you could help me out, is that each school has their own occupational health and safety committee to help work on some of these plans in the school location. So we've got the district plan that we're talking about, but then it also drills right down to the school level where the plan is going to be built in by staff members in the building, including the school principal and other staff members.
Assistant Superintendent Tate, would you like to respond?
Thank you, through the chair. That's correct. So we have, of course, the district health and safety plan that we submit, but then schools are directed to take that plan and contextualize it for their own schools with their own school-based health and safety committee. And those are submitted then centrally to the district office. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions from trustees? Trustee Keller?
Yes, thank you. I'm curious to know a little bit more whether or not before and after school care programs would be invited back to our schools, or if the learning care centers, I believe we're calling them, will continue to operate.
Yeah, the answer is through the chair, yes to that question, and I see Secretary Treasurer Walsh, who could probably best answer that.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, so we have been in much communication with our before and after school providers that are on site to ensure that, well, number one, that kids are going to be able to have care, but also to be able to send staff and parents of schools where that is not an option to be able to access them. And so it's looking like approximately about 75% of the providers that are on our sites will be reopening and providing those services, and in some circumstances we may even be able to expand or let them maintain their expansion of service to children under school age, but the district won't be providing that service any longer.
Do you have a follow-up question, Trustee Keller?
No, I don't. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Trustee Brzovic has a question.
Thank you. I was trying to figure out how to word it. I've been sitting on it for a few minutes. Through the chair, Mr. Saywell or Ms. Tate, what kind of guidance has the ministry provided around playgrounds and appropriate activities for what kids are allowed to do at recess and lunch?
Yeah, thank you through the chair. That playgrounds, you will see playgrounds opening soon, and I will turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Tate to answer the second part of that question, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you through the chair. We haven't had any specific direction from the ministry. However, we have either internally created or we've done some research around activities that can be safely done, social distancing, etc., while students are outside, as we are strongly encouraging during June for folks to be outside, for students and teachers to be outside as often as possible. We haven't had any specific direction around those activities, but there's lots of really good healthy resources out there. Again, the play fields, gyms were appropriate. All those spaces are open for activities and for running and for staying active. We will be, as Superintendent Saywell stated, we will be opening the play structure soon. We are just waiting on that for the minute.
Great, thank you. Trustee Brzovic, do you have a follow-up question?
Just to clarify then. So then, as one of the things I've heard from Dr. Henry is that outside is a great place to be, so we will be allowing more opportunities for outdoor education and play, even maybe instruction in some ways outside.
Through the chair?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct, exactly. And looking at ways to do our academic classes and activities as well as do those outside, as well as the actually intended activities to be outside and playing, yes.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Higginson.
Thank you. Ooh, the possibility of blending the academics with the outside just makes my heart sing. It's maybe one of the benefits of stretching ourselves and having the opportunity to. So that really excites me. It's another busing question. Maybe this should have been a follow-up, but I feel like a bit like I'm hogging the mic. Is there a possibility that busing will be on an altered schedule than what people had? Like, are they going to be running sort of 2 routes, or do we know yet?
Yes, through the chair, I can respond to that, and then perhaps Secretary Treasurer Walsh will jump in as well. We're still a little unclear on that. We know we're going to have buses running, but until we know exactly how many students are going to be on the buses, and that we have to do the physical distancing that's required, then we can't really ascertain if we'll need 2 buses on one route, as an example, or maybe depending on how many students come back, we might not need any buses on one route. There might be a change that we'll clearly let the public know about. if we have to change the routes, that there won't be a stop at a particular place. But we're working through those issues, and to get that, and this is one of the great reasons why we're restarting in June. We'll have to figure this out in a go forward manner, and this is a good way to do it. Thank you.
Trustee Higginson, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up something. It's just a comment on something the superintendent said. You know, we're still figuring it out, and I really would like, I'm hoping that from the information families are hearing tonight, that they recognize that still figuring it out doesn't mean we don't know. I think they're different contexts right now, and this is a, an enormous sector that's turning on a dime, and I just really want to try to reiterate to our families out there that there's a difference between we're still figuring it out and we don't know, because our staff does know a lot and is just waiting on some further answers, and we're all trying to be, we're asking for patience and flexibility and nimbleness, not only from our staff, but also from our families that we're working really hard with safety in mind. And so just to make sure that people understand the difference between, we're still working on it and we don't know. So that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, I just have to acknowledge the work and the presentation, and maybe I'll add my own comment because, hey, I'm chairing and they let you do that. Often we hear that Dr. Henry has a very calming presence in sharing information that is relevant and necessary for people to understand. And I find myself reflecting this evening that the responses that we receive from our superintendent and from our staff give me that same peace of mind, recognizing that we're addressing all of the issues that arise and working really closely with our stakeholder partners and creating really great plans for making our schools safe places to be for everyone. So I just, want to recognize the work that goes into that and the way that you're able to present it this evening. So thank you all for your work.
Thank you very much. If I could just comment on Trustee Higginson's comment, which was astute, and I hope people don't take the we're working on it comment as that we don't know what we're doing, because we really do, and it's sort of a form of adaptive management approach where we're all going through this for the first time, and we are making mistakes, and we're acknowledging those mistakes, and we're moving forward, and that's the way we operate. And I'll just, my final comment is this, that it is absolutely low risk, completely safe for students to be in school. And I would implore them, beseech them to come back and learn in a classroom. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we'll be moving on to section 13.3. Deputy Superintendent Tim Davey with a school calendar committee update for the board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just through the chair, if I could ask the board to refer to page 39 of 94 in your agenda package. It's my pleasure to bring before you and just share information regarding the local school calendar committee. And as a backgrounder on this, just a reminder that on December 18th, 2019, the regular Board of Education meeting, the following motion was adopted, and it's folio R19/12/18-09. The Board of Education of School District Number 68, the Nanaimo Ladysmith, immediately strike an advisory ad hoc local school calendar committee with appropriate representation, and that the local school calendar committee develop and recommend a local school calendar to the Education Committee and the Board of Education. So with that, we have followed through. We do have a local school calendar committee in place. And we have representation from the Board of Education through trustees Bursavich and Higginson. We also have representation from our various partner groups, including the NDTA, QB, DPAC, and ENSA, as well as staff from our school district. Just updated information then, the Department of Learning Services subsequently established the local school calendar committee with appropriate stakeholder representation, as I pointed out. And to date, the committee has met on 2 occasions, March 5th, 2020 and May 4th, 2020. The following topics were discussed during those meetings. Number 1, the 3-year local school calendar. Number 2, instructional time. Number 3, consistent school schedules. And number 4, professional learning communities or PLCs. The calendar committee recommends that the bell schedule for elementary schools be changed to reflect a consistent dismissal schedule Monday through Friday. And this means that there will no longer be an early dismissal on Mondays, resulting in equal instructional time each day of the week. The next steps for the committee include a review of the draft bell schedule by the manager of transportation to confirm that the busing schedules can be adjusted accordingly, followed by a consultation at the school level to change the bell schedules. In conclusion, the calendar committee will meet again in the early fall to discuss the community feedback received during the 2020-2021 local school calendar consultation and to make recommendations for a local school calendar for the years 2021-22 and 2022-2023. So in conclusion, the work continues, and again, we have direction as brought forward by the representatives on the committee, and just bring forward again recommendation for consideration of the board at this time, and further updates to follow. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Davey? Not seeing any. Thank you for the update.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Take care. Moving on to 13.4, Secretary Treasurer Mark Walsh and Director of Finance Tanya Sutton regarding the 2020-2021 preliminary annual budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we have been through a number of meetings with respect to the budget to present the preliminary annual, to hear feedback from our stakeholders and have opportunity for trustees to ask questions. You'll see tonight there's an additional document, and that's the document you would have seen in previous years that is just essentially the preliminary annual budget made more complex in the ministry's template format that we have to hand in. So there's no additional information that's contained in the second document appended to the agenda. It's all contained in the preliminary annual budget. So therefore I wasn't going to go through it in any depth. What I did, however, want to mention at the outset, and I believe that's really appropriate given some of the questions that have been asked and the restart plan that the superintendent outlined, is that in addition to the money that staff has recommended for the board to approve for the COVID plan, what we're also recommend, or what the board should also be aware of, is that there is a $1.3 million surplus, and that $1.3 million surplus is really our reserve fund. And that number is actually not reflected in the budget because the money is available. It's not being proposed to be spent. So in the event that there's an emergency and the board needs to make expenditures for COVID in July after our experience in June, for instance, the board can access those funds. So I think it's important, and I hope that's responsive to a number of questions. We're not recommending adding those expenditures to the budget, however, because we do know that there's additional funds coming in at the end of June from lessened expenditures. So less teachers teaching on call being called in for March, for April, for May. And so those funds will flow into September when we come back to the board and give our year-end numbers. And so that we anticipate there to be a relatively significant amount of dollars available for the board to be able to target at various board priorities and or COVID response if that is indeed the case. So I think the message that's really important is that we are positioned as a district due to the board's financial acumen over the years of keeping reserve funds to be able to respond to that. The second piece that I just wanted to bring up is that we continue to monitor our international student program. And so we'll note that we are recommending the continued support of that international student program because we think it's going to come back. So we're being very conservative in our enrollment estimates, as we've noted, 67, when initially we were planning for 260 odd students, a little bit more. So what we see on the ground, again, is a number of students that remain in country. They're not going home, they're staying in BC to finish up graduation, and or they've paid their tuition. And so we're pretty confident of the number that we've already enrolled. The other update that I would provide the board is that, well, we certainly may be looking at not that growth of students in September, given the unknowns, but we are getting a number of students that are asking about January, that are asking about second semester, and a huge interest for 21-22 as well. So those are anecdotal, of course, but we can already see that we can anticipate that barring COVID lasting for that long, that the projection or the recommendation to maintain the program in a manner that we can support those kids when they come, we think that is supportable. So I wasn't intending to go over the documents tonight, but I wanted to be able to answer any questions that the board may have of myself and Director Sutton. And I want to also acknowledge that Associate Secretary Treasurer Maureen Hamley is also available to answer questions.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have any questions of our finance team? Trustee Stanley?
Hi, thank you. Yes, through the chair. One of the, I need some more information. So one of the recommendations, although not necessarily a huge recommendation, is a little bit troubling to me, and that is the reduction to our counselors by one position. It's troubling just because, well, we're in a pandemic, and as we all know, there's lots of mental health challenges and lots of anxiety. And so as much as it's only one position, it feels a little bit uncomfortable considering the context that we are in. I'm wondering if you could perhaps explain to me a bit about why that recommendation was put forward, or just a little bit more background, please.
So through you, Madam Chair. So that's the change doesn't have a financial impact on the budget, but certainly Learning Services, I know, is able to address the change.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer, and through the chair. In response to the question, I have had opportunity to follow up further with the Department of Learning Services and have further update and information regarding that position. So as has been noted in the past, what we are seeking to do is just reallocate time that was allotted to counselors in the past to a position, supporting a position for inclusion support, and that coming in the form of a coordinator position. As has been noted previously, we have 3 inclusion support coordinators within the district, and we would be seeking to increase that position to 4. It's important for me to be able to note this evening that we are actually not seeking to reduce the number of counselors. We're just reshifting the counseling position into the inclusion support team, or onto the inclusion support team. So what has been shared with me is that at present we have, as I mentioned, 3 inclusion support coordinators, and the backgrounds, skill sets that each of those coordinators brings. At present we have a inclusion support coordinator who is an occupational therapist, trained occupational therapist. We have another coordinator who is a life skills focused And sorry, I should mention that the occupational therapist within the team focuses on adaptations for the physical environment and early primary, and largely around child development. The life skills teacher is very focused on students who are physically dependent and have intellectual disabilities, and a lot of the time for this individual staff member's time is focused on facilitating functional programs and supporting transition planning. The third member of the team at present is a board certified cognitive specialist who also holds credentials as a board certified behavioral analyst. And within this position, in quotes, this person is an autism guru and helps the team piece together individual schedules and routines and helps teams understand the complex behaviors that result in having neurological differences. So that's the makeup of the team at present. As mentioned, what we would be looking to do, again, is shifting from our counseling ratios into inclusion support and adding an inclusion support coordinator who has a focus on counseling. So obviously the credentials that individual would have is around counseling. The rationale behind this, and I'll just share here, a key component of this role would be to focus attention on students whose complex needs have challenged schools to find ways to provide safe learning environments. In the past 5 years, we've seen a significant increase in the number of referrals to the inclusion support team for learners who have experienced trauma or who live with complex personal circumstances. So through the inclusion support referrals, schools continue to reach out for assistance in ways that support learners with behavioral support plans, integration plans, employee safety plans, and elopement protocols. And our inclusion support team does an outstanding job of supporting our schools. However, the skill set we are missing on the inclusion support team is a coordinator who understands the facets of mental health and how they are intertwined with learning current research on trauma, our trauma-informed practices and restorative practices. So as has been previously mentioned, that is an additional component that we wish to add to the work of the inclusion support team around those areas. So the inclusion support coordinator would be then focusing on counseling and would fill this void. And what I can share just in terms of our referrals, in 2015-16, there were 62 referrals to this team, and 13 of those referrals were for supporting complex behaviors and other categories, including students who are physically dependent, autism, and other learning challenges. So complex behaviors represented 13 of those referrals. Moving ahead then, 5 years, 2019-20, as of March 15th, there were 152 referrals made to the inclusion support team, and of those, 83 of those referrals are for complex behaviors. Within this as well, I'm just going to share, and this is in direct response to the question, the inclusion support coordinator is an itinerant specialist who provides consultation, training, and technical assistance to the school support team. The inclusion support coordinator also consults with the school-based teams, outside agencies, and parents. So it is a shift from our traditional counseling type positions that we would see within our schools, particularly at elementary. But again, the focus for this position would be on counseling. So through the chair, I'm happy to ask or answer additional questions that might pertain to that position and recommendation.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Davey. Trustee Stanley, do you have a follow-up question?
No, that actually provided a lot of information and did answer my alleviate my concern. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you. Trustee Keller is looking for some clarification on a response. Trustee Keller?
Yes, thank you. And that was a very detailed, through the chair, sorry, very detailed response, Mr. Davey. Thank you for that. One part that perhaps I missed, and maybe you could help me understand, Sue, I believe it was explained that it wasn't a loss of a counselor position. And correct me if I got that wrong, but I just want to understand, was it because it was an unfilled position, or is it because there was a sort of a transfer of the duties to the new role as coordinator?
I would say the latter. So what I can speak to is that in previous years, including this year, we have had counselor positions that have gone unfilled. So it's a situation that we know that we need to address. As I've mentioned previously, we have actually a ratio for counseling time within our district. And as a district, we have been over in terms of that allocation for counselor ratios. And what we are seeking to do, again, under the status quo mandate, is to shift counseling time from the traditional role of a school counselor onto the role as a counselor being added to the inclusion support team.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Davies. I don't need to follow up, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the thoughtfulness and our ability to create inclusive classrooms. So I certainly support the direction that we're moving there. Let's see here. Trustee Higginson, you're next, please.
Thank you, through the chair. My question is actually, and I know I missed last week, and I did watch it, but maybe I missed it. I'm just wondering what we've done with the student input. You know, we hosted that meeting with the students. We heard from them. We heard some follow up from them. I think we even said we were going to follow up with them. I'm just wondering where we can see their input worked into the budget since the first draft that was presented to the draft we're seeing today.
Through you, Madam Chair. So there's a number of places, and I can speak. I'll speak to the capital side, even though that's not really central to the debate that's happening. But we are seeing that our capital plan and our capital goals align with what we're hearing from students. And so on the capital side, we heard a few specific instances of schools in need of help. From a facilities perspective, but we did also hear pretty regularly, and I think the board's already addressing this, is the issue of the lack of great access to Wi-Fi, therefore impacting their technology in their schools. And so you will see still in this budget, and now it's not a shift because of the input, but it's a continuation and a confirmation that the board's direction is the one that's responsive to that issue. You'll see a transfer to local capital to be able to support the Wi-Fi plan. And we've, of course, I think I've previously noted, sped it up already by hiring an additional electrician to help the plan. So that's one area. I know a number of the comments were also associated with actually provision of education as well. Now that's not a budget question, but I do maybe turn it over to superintendent or deputy because I believe they're taking some of those comments away for thought, but put them on the spot on that issue.
Yeah, thank you. I can respond through the chair. I can tell you that the number one ranked response was getting rid of the extending and developing grading system. So we can't do that, but and we knew that at least some students are rather concerned about the new grading system. The second one was improving internet connection, as Secretary Treasurer Walsh was mentioning, and we're working on that. And then a lot of the input after that is really around things we can do in with continually, not necessarily through a budget process. And there's some really good information from this survey. I'll just read a couple more that I know Learning Services is aware of and or thinking of including. Classes on how to do things after high school, like how to do your taxes or buying a house, etc. That is a great response. adding more places in schools for students to sit at lunch. Again, something related to Wi-Fi, and it goes on, but lots of these things are areas that can be developed in the curriculum. So thank you.
Trustee Higginson, you have a follow-up question?
Thanks. So, you know, this Wi-Fi thing, we hear a lot about it, and I just want to make sure that our allocation of contingency for the budget to offset some of our deficit areas, as well as the $200,000 in COVID, and we're talking about the 1.3 million in restricted. So I want to make sure that that doesn't negatively impact our ability to address this capital concern of our students. Are we moving money? This whole restricted, unrestricted contingency thing it's like a big black hole, to the public, because it's super confusing. So I just want us to be able to explain to the students that we're hearing their concerns and that we're on track, and that the allocation of the various surpluses and contingencies that we're talking about utilizing for balancing our budget for next year aren't going to impact our ability to deal with this important request.
Sure. So through you, Madam Chair. So for instance, that was something that we contemplated when we lowered the amount that we recommended of transfer from operating to local capital from year to year for the Wi-Fi project. And one of the reasons we did that, or there's two reasons we did that. One was that, frankly, we weren't spending the money. Staff changes, not enough, bodies to do the work, I suppose. And so now we've put a huge priority on that in IT and facilities. And so we had $900,000 still in our local capital fund to spend. And so that's getting spent as we speak, but that's going to go a fair way. So we're going to add 600,000 or 650,000 to that number for $1.5 million. So we're confident that that's going to get us through certainly at least the next year of installations. What we may do, and I believe I noted in one of the previous presentations, is come back in September if we do have that surplus and recommend replenishing those dollars at that point. But we're confident that we have enough for the next year to be able to support that particular project. So we don't see an impact from the recommended changes or the recommended budget on that particular issue at the very least.
Great, thank you. Trustee Keller has a question.
Yes, thank you, Joe. Just keeping in line with, through the chair, with talking or discussing feedback, I'd also like to get a sense of, we did a process to get feedback from the broader community through Thought Exchange, and we had some good comments and response. And I'm wondering if staff could share with us sort of what's included in the budget in response to that as well.
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. So as we noted before, or noted in the initial presentation, our adult to student ratios are some of the lowest that they've been. And so we didn't target, for instance, a lot of the feedback involved smaller class sizes, for instance. So we didn't target smaller class sizes based off of the huge shifts that we've seen in the last couple of years that have addressed, partially addressed that issue. And I'm not suggesting that, more resources wouldn't be great if they were available. But because of those shifts recently, that was one of the reasons to look at that. EA time is obviously another thing that we heard about. And so you won't see a huge recommendation to increase EA time, but we certainly ensured that we maintain the same EA time that's been proposed in previous years. So I think that those were from the staff that we heard from, those were two of the priorities. And I think that particularly given the fact that to lower a class size would be an enormous investment versus some of the other smaller investments or the maintaining of programs as we've proposed. That's why we didn't address them in a large way, but I think it's recognized that more support is needed.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm having technical difficulties. Sorry. Trustee Keller, did you have a follow-up question?
If I may.
Go ahead.
So through the chair, one of the, like you had mentioned, the most popular comments was related to EAs and seemed to be quite a bit of community support to get more supports in the classroom. My question is, are we able to fill the demand that we currently have for EAs? And would there be any, maybe not phrasing this the best way, but benefit, if you will, of including additional resources in the budget if we can't fill the positions that we'd like to at this point?
So, through you, Madam Chair, I'm not sure, or Superintendent, I see him coming up. I'm not sure of the HR issues with the EAs in our district as of yet.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Through the chair, you've picked on one of our challenges in the school district, and that is that we do have an EA shortage, and while we're trying to fill those positions, it is a challenging proposition. We do have regularly a failure to fill on educational assistants in the district, and so you are quite correct. Putting more EAs into our budget doesn't necessarily mean more EAs in the classroom.
Thank you, Mr. Saywell.
Thank you. Trustee Higginson has a question.
Thank you, through the chair. I just want to, just because I'm hearing a lot about it, about our ability to respond next year to the, higher cleaning standards that are required. I just want to see if I'm hearing correctly what the Secretary Treasurer was saying. So what you were saying is we haven't put it in the budget yet because we are still waiting for some more clarity on what those requirements will be, because 4 months or 3 months in the world of COVID is actually a lifetime if we think about it. So rather than build it into the budget now, what the plan is to address those concerns closer to the date with the most stringent measures in place, utilizing either the current contingency that we have of $1.3 million or the surplus money that we may have from this year's budget that was unspent money as a result of our 2 months of not offering face-to-face instruction to the students. So the district does have a plan to address those things directly and meaningfully, but we're going to utilize surplus to do it because it's not an ongoing expense. It's an unusual circumstance.
So through you, Madam Chair. So yes, but I will add to that as well, is to say, so for instance, I think we've told the board that we have 9 casual custodians, and I believe I incorrectly said it was 8. 9 casual custodians that have been brought on for the entire month of June to assist with the process. We've reallocated evening staff to daytime staff, and so now we have someone there all the time to be able to support. And so the additional, that's not a cost, but the additional casual staff being permanent for the month or being full-time for the month is a cost. So yes, so we number one need to see how that works in June and see if it's meeting our needs, or if there's alternatives to the processes that would still work for us. But then yes, fundamentally, these costs, if they're going to happen on an ongoing basis, or sorry, if they're going to be a response to COVID, would be a one-time expenditure, we would assume. And so that would mean that we would come back to you, come back to the board in September and say, okay, we have the surplus of, let's say, approximately $2 million from the end of June. Leave the $1.3 million rainy day fund or surplus or reserves aside for a moment. Board, we think that we need to spend $1 million of that this year on additional custodial. We would make that recommendation to be able to support it. Those jobs would be hired, and then next year we wouldn't actually be asking the board to cut people because it was never in the budget in the first place. So it would be pretty clear that it was a kind of COVID response. So absolutely, we are 100% prepared to respond to the additional costs. Well, assuming they're not $10 million, we're ready to respond to what we see are the guidelines put out by the ministry.
Trustee Higginson, do you have a follow-up question?
No, I don't. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions around the budget? So interestingly, I'm going to raise a question with the board. I haven't heard any feedback this evening that would suggest the board is looking to see changes to the proposed preliminary annual budget. Is the board prepared or ready to consider entertaining a motion to approve the budget at this time, or are they looking to wait until our June date that was previously set? It's a question to board members, if you wouldn't mind letting me know where you're at, if we can conclude this discussion and come back at a later time, or if there's a desire to, we could move towards passing the budget. Okay. Just giving everybody a minute to be able to comment. Trustee Higginson, I see you on my screen. Would you like to comment?
Yeah, sorry. You know what? I don't necessarily foresee changes, but I do think that in this time of, the current context we're in, which is constantly changing, knowing that the public has been given a date of June, I don't foresee a lot of changes happening, but for me personally, in this current context, I would feel more comfortable waiting. Not because I see changes necessary. I support the budget as is with some of the conversations we've had, but I do think that it would make perhaps the public feel a little better to have an opportunity to provide us with a bit more input.
Okay, so I'm recognizing that I have had information shared with me by a number of trustees through our online forum, and so what we'll do is conclude our budget discussion for this evening, and we'll be looking to bring back the budget bylaws, etc., in June as planned. So that concludes 13.4 for business. Thank you to our finance team for being here today. I know we've changed formats and we've done a lot of different work this year, and your work on all of this has been appreciated. I think our budget process has been really clear this year for everyone, and that's due to a lot of the work that you've put in, so thank you. So moving on to the agenda, we have no unfinished business. We have no new business. For information, we have our 16.1, our vandalism report, and 16.2 board motions report. Were there any questions from trustees around those two reports? Seeing none, just let me check. We have no questions from the public this evening, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Can I get a mover? Moved by Trustee Berzovich, seconded by Trustee O'Neill. Is there any objection to adjourning? It carries. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks
Good
for
evening.
your work, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks for